You'd think everything had already been said: infidelity, scandal, divorce. But sometimes betrayal isn't the end. Sometimes it's just the prologue. When the woman you once worshipped crosses the line where words end and the bumper hits, it's not just love that shatters, but your entire sense of reality. Because worse than the pain is the realization that the monster in your life wasn't hiding under the bed. He was sleeping beside you. And now she's behind the wheel, speeding straight toward the one who dared to give you a second chance at happiness. Greetings, my dear friend. I am very happy that you are watching my video, and I will be even happier if you subscribe to my channel. This will make me even happier. Let's get started. I'm Kyle, 39 years old, and once believed with every fiber of my being that Sierra, 35, was the one I'd grow old with. For the longest time, I was convinced we were unbreakable. I kept replaying the same line in my head: 6 years gone, never coming back. From the moment our conversation started on Instagram, it felt like winning the lottery. Sierra radiated charm, a dazzling mix of wit, beauty, and what felt like effortless perfection. My own upbringing had been marred by volatility. My mother was unpredictable, erupting in rage in the dead of night, shattering dishes, screaming at my dad. But he stayed, rooted in his love for us. That chaos molded me. It taught me to be wary, especially in relationships. So with Sierra, I was careful. For 2 solid years, I observed her closely. I watched how she coped with stress, how she managed money, how she treated baristas and waiters. I wasn't being paranoid. I thought I was being prudent. I didn't want to recreate the storm I was raised in. And she passed every test. She was kind, reliable, generous. Nothing like my mother. I believed I had broken the cycle. We had a storybook wedding, moved into a quaint house in the suburbs, and started building what I assumed was a shared dream. But after a while, things started to come apart. Like a bad pattern, we'd erupt every month over trivial things: dirty mugs, my late nights at work, her nights out, or even choosing a show to stream. I couldn't make sense of it. This was the same woman who once arranged surprise trips and left sweet notes in my lunchbox. Now, she was snapping at me over the brand of coffee I brought home. I wasn't ready to walk away. I still believed we were fixable. I pushed hard for therapy, because to me, love meant repairing the cracks, not abandoning the house. I practically begged. We managed one counseling session, and it was a train wreck. She stared at me and said, "You wanted this, you pay for it." I'd found a marriage therapist with excellent credentials, booked everything, paid every dime. During that session, the therapist gently pointed out some unhelpful communication patterns and suggested Sierra might benefit from working through how she handled conflict. Sierra broke down sobbing, said the therapist was attacking her, and refused to go back. She accused me of trying to make her look unhinged and dismissed the therapist as a fraud. It later came out that she'd lost her father not long before our arguments had intensified. Grief can twist people in ways we don't expect, and I tried to lead with empathy, but she wouldn't talk about it, wouldn't seek help, just withdrew further and grew more explosive. One night her fury reached such a pitch that our neighbors actually called the police. They thought someone was being hurt. The trigger? I'd forgotten to pick up her dry cleaning. Over time, our relationship morphed into something strange and sad. We became little more than roommates who occasionally had intimacy. Our days became a bleak routine. Get up, go to work, eat silently, go to bed. Repeat. The silence probably muted the fights. We weren't talking enough to start one. Still I stayed. Still loved her. Foolishly. Completely. Sad, right? I clung to those golden early moments, hoping they'd somehow return if I just worked hard enough. I meant every word of our vows, especially the "for better or worse." But I failed to consider how forsaking all others might eventually betray me. I grew up believing marriage was something you didn't abandon, unless it turned abusive or someone cheated. I didn't know it then, but one of those boundaries was about to be crossed. At the time, I was slogging through a soul-sucking job in corporate America. Nothing fancy, just meetings, spreadsheets, and fluorescent lights. I wasn't high-ranking enough for luxury perks, but important enough to be shipped off to industry conferences now and then. One week I flew out of state for a work event, 4 days of panels, badges, and awkward networking. Midway through, our company's servers went down. Total chaos. The execs ordered everyone back. Always the loyal employee, or just gullible, I grabbed the next flight home. In my mind, I envisioned this dramatic movie-style return. I'd surprise Sierra, rekindle what we had with a bold, romantic gesture. During the Uber ride from the airport, I planned it all. I stopped at an upscale florist and spent $80 on purple orchids, her favorite, tied to our very first date. Picked up a bottle of champagne and her favorite gourmet chocolates. I told myself, this will spark something. She'll remember what we had. I reached our driveway around 2 p.m., heart full of hope. Her car was parked outside, no surprise. Thursdays, she worked from home. Everything seemed in order, but something didn't sit right. Her go-to playlist was blaring upstairs, the one she only played when she was in a rare, euphoric mood. 2 wine glasses were in the sink. Still trusting, I thought maybe she'd had a friend over. I made my way upstairs, eager to sweep her into my arms. But as I reached the top, I caught sounds layered beneath the music. Noises that made my blood run cold. It felt like one of those horror movie moments where you scream at the character not to open the door. That was me, but I opened it anyway. And in a single soul-crushing moment, everything I thought I knew came crashing down. 6 years of love, trust, and dreams built up over time all came crashing down in a single unforgiving moment. The woman I had stood by, loved without reservation, and imagined growing old with was now in bed with another man. Our bed. The very place where I had comforted her through the grief of losing her father. The bed where we once whispered hopes for the children we would raise. And there she was, treating me like a stranger, as if our entire marriage had been a mere illusion from the start. They didn't even bother to hide it. Like rats scrambling when the light is turned on, they panicked. The bouquet I had picked up on the way home slipped from my hand and hit the floor. He rushed past me, barely dressed, brushing against me as if I were a mere obstacle in his hasty escape. Clothes were scattered on the floor like remnants of a battle, and something inside me snapped. Maybe it was the sight of him invading my space, or the sheer audacity he had thinking he could simply walk away without consequences. My body reacted instinctively. I grabbed him by the neck. It wasn't a full choke, more like a warning, a gesture to make him understand the line he had crossed. I didn't punch him. Instead, I slapped him. Twice. The kind of slap you'd expect to see in a melodramatic soap opera, not a fight at a bar. I still don't understand why I didn't hit him harder. His expression morphed from shock to fury, as if he were ready to challenge me in the very home I had paid for. It occurred to me that she must have told him I was an ex, or maybe that we were separated. He probably didn't even know who I was. I released him, not out of fear, but because he wasn't worth facing a charge. He had made no promises to me. He hadn't taken vows with me. The betrayal wasn't his to bear. I turned to face Sierra, and a rush of rage flooded through me. She was fidgeting with her bra, acting as though this was a mere awkward situation, not the destruction of everything we had built together. The purple orchids I had splurged on were trampled beneath her feet. She stood in front of the mirror I had installed for her last Christmas, the one she had said gave her the perfect light, brushing through her hair as if she were preparing for a night out. She didn't even meet my gaze in the reflection. With an air of annoyance, she turned to me and asked, "What are you doing back so early?" No apology, no remorse. There was no explanation, no fabricated excuse. Just irritation, like I was the one at fault for arriving home unannounced. Then she muttered, "You weren't supposed to be here," as if I had interrupted her plans. as if I needed her permission to enter my own home. 6 years of marriage, and now I was nothing more than a disruption to her affair. My eyes fell on our wedding photo, still resting on the nightstand. That same nightstand where I had served her breakfast just days ago. For months, she had claimed to be too tired for intimacy, yet she had found plenty of energy for him. And like an utter fool, I stood there, replaying every late night she spent at the office, every girls' night, every visit to her mother. It all began to add up. How long had this been going on? How many strangers had I unknowingly shared my bed with? But she wasn't finished, not by a long shot. What she said next still haunts me. She turned the situation on its head, making me out to be the villain. Her voice grew louder as she shouted, "You weren't supposed to be here!" Her face turned red and blotchy with anger, the same way it used to when we had our worst fights. "This is your fault," she snapped. "You wouldn't have caught us if you'd just told me you were coming home." I stood there, stunned, watching her twist reality to make it fit her narrative. She even tried to cast herself as the victim, as if I had wronged her. Then she said something I never imagined I would hear again. "You said no to an open marriage." She said it like it was some kind of defense. I remembered that night, just a single remark, tossed out after a few too many drinks. I shut it down immediately because I believed in loyalty. But apparently, that meant nothing to her. "I have needs," she said, as if I were the monster for expecting exclusivity. Then she had the nerve to say, "I tried to do this without hurting you," as if cheating behind my back was some kind of noble attempt at kindness. That's when something inside me shattered. 6 years of love, memories, and promises, all reduced to, "I have needs." Every whispered, "I love you," every kiss in the morning, it all felt like a lie. My hands trembled as I stepped toward her. I grabbed the collar of the shirt I had given her for her birthday just a month ago. The pain she caused me was overwhelming, and there was a primal part of me that wanted her to feel just a fraction of it. But then I saw it, the fear in her eyes, and that stopped me. Despite everything, I knew I couldn't become that person. I saw my mother's face in hers, those moments when my father had lost control. I had promised myself I would never be like him. So I unclenched my fists. I let go. I stepped back. Just when I thought the worst was over, she twisted the knife even deeper. Surrounded by the broken remains of the orchids, she looked at me with venom in her eyes and hissed, "You were going to hit me, weren't you?" Her voice was sharp, full of contempt. "This is why I don't love you anymore. You're not a real man." Her accusations followed me, crashing down like thunder after a lightning strike, loud, forceful, and impossible to escape. In moments, she shifted from trembling like a scared child to hurling venom at the man she had just betrayed. It wasn't until later, during a conversation with my friend Miles, that I realized her outburst might have been deliberate. Perhaps she had been trying to provoke me, hoping I would lash out in anger so she could portray herself as the victim. Her plan could have been to march into a police station with self-inflicted bruises, crying abuse, and walk away with half of everything I owned, along with a monthly paycheck. The mere thought of it made my stomach churn. I couldn't stay in that house for another second. It reeked of betrayal. Her perfume mixed with his lingered on the sheets where I had once held her during countless sleepless, tear-filled nights. I grabbed my keys, stuffed my wallet in my pocket, and got in my car, driving aimlessly until my instincts guided me to Miles's house. He opened the door, took one look at me, and silently poured me a double shot of whiskey. Miles had been down this road before, his own scars from divorce, and he knew the nightmare I was about to enter. "You need a lawyer." "Now," he said bluntly. Then the punch to the gut. Sierra worked part-time in retail, pretending it was a career, while I was pulling in 6 figures. In our state, that meant I could be on the hook for alimony. Yes, financial support for the woman who had just torn my life apart. The sheer injustice of it was maddening. That's the cruel irony of the system. Betrayal doesn't always come with consequences, at least not for the one who's at fault. Even when you're the one wronged, you can still be the one who ends up paying. Miles, ever the realist, reminded me that her affair could play into the court's decision, if I could prove it. Document everything, he urged. Every text, every email, every receipt. Build your case. That was the first glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't be forced to fund her new life. My mind was a storm of rage and disbelief. Just hours ago, I had been a devoted husband, preparing a surprise for her. Now I sat on Miles's couch, struggling to hold back nausea while I searched for divorce lawyers, trying not to think about the emotional wreckage I had just walked away from. Forgiveness wasn't even an option. I may have been foolish enough to buy her roses, but I wasn't foolish enough to forget what she had done. While I sat there at Miles's, still raw, my phone started buzzing like a Christmas tree. Apparently, she wasn't finished. Unable to yell at me in person, she took her fury to text. What she sent was beyond cruel. It was monstrous. This was the same woman who just a week ago had been sending me love notes adorned with hearts. Now, she was graphically comparing me to the man she had cheated with, detailing how much better he was in bed. It felt like I was reading a performance review, complete with ratings and anatomical comparisons. She even had the audacity to claim he had ruined her for anyone else, as if I would ever want to touch her again after this. To top it off, she blamed me for destroying our relationship. Apparently, I was the villain for coming home early and disrupting her chance at real happiness. The mental gymnastics she performed to rewrite the narrative were astonishing. Miles cut through the madness, pulling me back to reality. Save everything, screenshot it, don't delete anything. He was right. Just minutes after finishing her vile message, the text bubbles began vanishing one by one. She was trying to delete the evidence. But it was too late. I had already saved everything. I wasn't going to let her erase her confession and rewrite history. The truth was secure, ready for court. When she realized she couldn't retract what had been captured, she shifted gears. No more boasting about her affair, just pure, unrelenting insults. Not a word about her betrayal. Her ability to flip from flaunting her infidelity to pretending it never happened was chilling. It was like watching someone clean up a crime scene while the body was still warm. That night, with Miles's whiskey burning my throat and his legal advice ringing in my ears, I barely slept. My mind spun in circles, replaying the nightmare as I scrolled through lawyer profiles until dawn. The following weeks were a haze of consultations. Some lawyers felt like amateurs, while others charged fees so high I thought I'd have to mortgage my soul. Then I met Landon. He was sharp to the point and didn't ask for a fortune up front. More importantly, he genuinely seemed committed to helping me. When I showed him the screenshots and the photos of our ruined bedroom, he gave a knowing smile. He wasn't naive. He told me the system wasn't always fair, but he assured me we had a real chance to minimize or even avoid alimony. Still, he warned me, our state favored the spouse with the lower income, no matter their actions. But Landon promised to fight for me, and for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt like I wasn't in this alone. The glimmer of hope returned the day Sierra was officially served. Of course, she didn't go down without a show. For almost a month, she dodged the process server like a character in an action movie. She changed her shifts, refused to answer the door, and even had her mother lie about her moving out of state. Ironically, after months of avoiding exercise, she was finally cornered coming out of a yoga class. She was served at last. She took the full 30 days to respond, stretching out the timeline as much as she could, clearly trying to drain my finances, knowing Landon charged by the hour. From that moment on, Sierra made it her mission to turn the divorce into a petty contest of spite. She had this tendency to constantly misplace important things, Bank statements she must have had, crucial papers, and always arrived late to every meeting we had. Meanwhile, she insisted on cataloging every single item in the house, right down to each and every teaspoon. Her lawyer kept sending me ridiculous proposals, demanding not only the house and my 401k, but even spousal support. It was unbelievable. The same woman who I found out had cheated on me was now claiming she was entitled to a portion of my future retirement savings. On top of that, I learned from mutual friends that she was still involved with the man she had been having an affair with. It quickly became apparent that Sierra's sole aim was to make my life as miserable as possible, all while she continued to live hers without a care in the world. Every time we got close to a possible settlement, she'd either backpedal or throw in a new request, clearly relishing the fact that I was burning through money on legal fees. I could almost hear her laughter echoing as she made her way to her boyfriend's apartment, each time my attorney Landon had to handle yet another of her absurd demands. Amid all this madness, I attempted to distract myself by diving back into the dating scene. I ended up engaging in a series of shallow, meaningless encounters through various dating apps, which, to be honest, I'm not proud of. I downloaded Tinder, Bumble, and a few others, convincing myself that this was somehow part of the healing process. But each time I woke up after another one-night stand, I just felt emptier. The hollow feeling was a reminder of why I'd turned down Sierra's earlier request for an open relationship. That lifestyle had never appealed to me. I've always craved something deeper, someone to share inside jokes with, someone whose face I'd love to see first thing in the morning. The hookup scene felt like a flimsy substitute for true companionship. It was like I was trying to fill an emotional gap with pieces that just didn't fit. In search of something more meaningful, I remembered how much I used to love reading. Before Sierra, it was common for me to spend entire nights lost in a good book. So one Saturday, instead of endlessly swiping on dating apps or obsessively checking my inbox for updates from Landon, I wandered into a small indie bookstore in the downtown area. The place had charm, a cat napping in a sunbeam, wooden floors creaking underfoot, and the familiar scent of well-loved books. I found myself standing in the science fiction section, utterly overwhelmed. The genre had clearly evolved while I was consumed with work and a collapsing marriage. As I stood there, staring at unfamiliar titles and authors with names I couldn't pronounce, a soft laugh broke the quiet. It wasn't unkind, just the amused chuckle of someone genuinely entertained. I turned and saw a woman holding a book so massive it could have doubled as a doorstop. With a smile, she asked if I needed help. A little embarrassed, I admitted I was lost, but looking for something good in sci-fi. What happened next completely took me by surprise, in the best way possible. We ended up sitting together in a pair of cozy armchairs, tucked away in a quiet corner, as she excitedly introduced me to the must-reads of modern sci-fi. Her face lit up as she spoke about her favorite stories, and she had this endearing habit of tucking her hair behind her ear when she got excited. We talked for hours, everything from new space operas to timeless classics like Asimov. I mentioned the books I used to love in college, and she suggested a parallel universe series that she couldn't recommend highly enough. For the first time in ages, I had a real, meaningful conversation. No lawyers, no drama, no awkward first date talk. Just two people talking about books. For those few hours, I wasn't the man going through a bitter divorce. I was just someone enjoying an unexpectedly great conversation with a woman who seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. When we said goodbye, I gathered my courage, swallowed my nerves, and asked for her number. It had been so long since I felt that hopeful. Leaving the bookstore, I felt like a teenager again, nervous and excited as I saved her number in my phone. It was a bit ridiculous for a 36-year-old man, but there I was. With her number, a fresh sci-fi book recommendation, she suggested The Three-Body Problem, and the first real smile I'd had in months. I walked out of the store feeling like a weight had finally been lifted off my chest. Later that night, Our text exchange felt like a world away from the shallow, empty conversations I'd become used to on dating apps. There was something meaningful this time, something real. I realized I needed to be honest with her about the ongoing divorce before we went on our first official date. I had rehearsed that conversation in my mind countless times, convinced she'd walk away the moment I mentioned my soon-to-be ex-wife. But Valerie, that was her name, just sipped her wine, nodded, and thanked me for being honest. "Everyone has baggage," she said. "At least you're dealing with yours." No judgment, no uncomfortable silence, just calm understanding. She even joked that at least she didn't have to worry about me being secretly married if I was going through a divorce right in front of her. Valerie was everything Sierra wasn't. She listened carefully when we disagreed, asked thoughtful questions about my work, remembered the little things I mentioned, and never once made me feel guilty about the mess I was still trying to clean up. For the first time in a long time, I felt truly heard. And the most remarkable part? We hadn't met through apps or mutual friends, just two strangers connecting over a shared love of science fiction in a quiet bookstore. It was one of those moments that felt like it had been written in the stars. 5 months into dating Valerie, I found myself completely smitten. She made every part of my life better, sending me book recommendations while I was at work, leaving little notes in the novels she lent me, and always being there when I needed someone to talk to. She never once nagged me about when the divorce would be finalized. She simply supported me, offering reassurance through every frustrating phone call with Landon and every petty move Sierra made. Just when I was beginning to feel genuinely happy again, truly okay, life decided to throw another curveball. Valerie and I had just spent a beautiful Saturday together. We'd gone shopping, had lunch at a cozy little cafe, and were walking back to her car as the sun set, chatting about which movie to watch that evening. One moment, Valerie's laughter filled the air, and in the next, my world collapsed. I heard the deafening roar of an engine before I even saw the vehicle. A car charging toward us with deadly precision. My instincts took over. I yanked Valerie's arm, trying to pull her out of harm's way. But I wasn't quick enough. The car clipped her leg, and I heard the sickening crack of bone that made my stomach churn. Her scream cut through the chaos, tearing at my very soul. I dropped to my knees beside her, frantically trying to shield her from any further danger. My hands shook uncontrollably as I searched for my phone to call for help. Then, the tires screeched again. The car wasn't leaving. It was reversing, getting ready to strike once more. A cold, brutal realization settled over me. This wasn't some tragic accident. It was a deliberate attack. Someone had made a choice to end our lives. Valerie twisted in pain, her leg contorted at an unnatural angle, the agony clear in every line of her face. There was no time for thinking, only reacting. My heart thudded in my chest, making it hard to breathe. I pulled Valerie between two parked cars, each movement sending new waves of agony through her. I hated causing her more pain, but staying still meant certain death. The car slammed into the spot we'd just vacated, colliding with the parked cars and setting off a cacophony of alarms. People screamed, cameras flashed, and chaos erupted around us. But through it all, the only sound I could hear was Valerie's sobs, raw, desperate, and endless. Then everything stopped. The driver's side door opened, and out stepped Sierra. She was calm, composed, as though stepping out of a car on a routine afternoon rather than from a weapon. She looked exactly as I remembered her. Perfectly dressed, her hair flawlessly styled, wearing the blazer she used to wear to work. But her eyes held something new, something terrifying. The contrast between her poised appearance and the carnage she'd just caused was bone-chilling. This was Sierra, my estranged wife, now a stalker, someone who seemed to have decided that if she couldn't have me, no one could. She hadn't lost control. She had made a deliberate choice to target Valerie, the woman who had helped me find happiness again, and to do so with the intention to kill. As I held Valerie, trying to protect her as best I could, something inside me shattered. This was no longer about a broken marriage. Sierra had crossed a line that could never be undone. I couldn't stop watching her, terrified she might have a weapon, a knife, a gun, anything to finish what she had started. The woman I had once known was gone. In her place stood someone unrecognizable, consumed by rage and vengeance. The person I had once loved, who I had caught cheating, was no longer there. What stood before me now was someone driven by hate and madness. She had planned this attack, stalked us, waited for the right moment, then struck with brutal precision. She walked toward us, her heels clicking like a countdown to our doom, her face expressionless, yet her eyes burning with malice. Just as it seemed she would reach us, a man from the crowd lunged and tackled her to the ground, restraining her as she writhed and screamed, a wild, feral animal. Even then, I couldn't look away. I stared at this woman who had once been my partner, the one I had shared everything with, now lying restrained like a criminal. The sirens blared as the police and paramedics arrived. Valerie winced in pain as they carefully placed her on a stretcher. Despite the agony, she forced a smile, trying to reassure me even as she was torn apart by pain. Meanwhile, Sierra was losing her mind. "A year! It's only been a year and you're with her?" she screeched, her voice dripping with venom. The crowd recoiled in shock at the fury in her words. I stood frozen, blood on my hands, watching as officers handcuffed her and dragged her toward the squad car. She fought them every step of the way, screaming as though I was the one who had wronged her. It was surreal, the sheer audacity of it all. This was the woman who had betrayed me, dragged our divorce into bitterness, and now tried to kill me and Valerie. Yet in her mind, I was the one who had destroyed her life. As she was shoved into the back of the police car, still spewing curses, I could barely comprehend what I was witnessing. I had once promised to love this woman, but now she had tried to kill me. In her twisted view of reality, I was the villain, for catching her in an affair. The woman who used to leave me sweet notes in my lunchbox had become someone capable of running people down without hesitation, and she truly seemed to believe her actions were justified. Every visit to the hospital, I feared it might be the last. How could I blame Valerie if she chose to walk away? After all, being with me had nearly gotten her killed. 5 months later, she was still in a full leg cast, enduring surgeries and physical therapy, all because of my past. When I finally admitted who had been behind the wheel, I couldn't even look her in the eye. I stared at the floor, waiting for Valerie to say she'd had enough, but instead, through the fog of painkillers, she squeezed my hand and said, "Well, at least she'll have time to work on her road rage in prison." She lay there, pinned together with metal rods, still trying to make me feel better. I asked her if she was sure she wanted to stay, after everything that had happened. Her response was firm, unyielding. "You think I'm going to let her win? I'll walk again. She'll rot in prison. I'd say I'm coming out ahead." The district attorney who took on the case quickly became fixated on it, especially after the security footage came in. It had captured every horrific moment of the attack, clear, undeniable, and chilling. Sierra's car moved through the parking lot with a predatory air, stalking its prey. She didn't pull in immediately. She circled, observing us carefully, waiting for the right moment. The prosecutor later pointed to this deliberate behavior as clear evidence of premeditation. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment mistake or a sudden burst of rage. She tracked us, waited for the perfect opportunity, and then struck. Surveillance footage showed her passing by us multiple times before finally making her move. Once she had lined up the angle she wanted, she floored the accelerator. The initial impact broke Valerie's leg. But Sierra didn't stop there. She slammed the car into reverse and went for another strike as I scrambled to pull Valerie out of the way, trying to shield her between two parked cars. The entire incident was captured from multiple angles on security cameras. The most chilling part? Just moments before the attack, she casually touched up her lipstick in the rearview mirror, as if she were preparing for a regular meeting, not about to carry out an attempted murder. That moment became a central piece of the prosecution's argument. The district attorney argued it was irrefutable evidence that Sierra was composed, intentional, and fully aware of what she was doing. This wasn't a heat-of-the-moment decision. It was a cold, calculated attempt to eliminate her ex-husband's new girlfriend. While the criminal case was unfolding, the divorce proceedings came to a halt. I spent those months managing court appearances, long hospital hours by Valerie's side, and struggling to keep up with work. My boss was understanding at first, but the continuous absences and delayed deadlines took their toll. The trial that followed felt like a textbook on securing a conviction. The state presented overwhelming evidence, starting with the crystal-clear footage from 6 different cameras. Witnesses came forward one by one. A suburban mother still clutching her grocery bags, a teenager who recorded the whole thing on his phone, and a retired cop who physically restrained Sierra at the scene. All of them testified that what they witnessed was no accident. It was a blatant public attempt on our lives. Valerie, still in a cast, took the stand with remarkable strength and composure. She didn't break down in tears. Instead, she spoke with calm precision about the moment the car came toward her, the excruciating pain of her broken leg, and the horror of realizing Sierra was coming back to finish what she had started. I also took the stand. I recounted the aggressive messages Sierra had sent me, described the disintegrating marriage, and spoke about the day I discovered her affair. Meanwhile, Sierra dabbed her eyes with tissues, pretending to be distraught. But the jury wasn't deceived. They returned with a unanimous verdict: guilty on all charges, reckless endangerment, aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, and attempted murder. Then came the sentencing, which brought its own set of frustrations. Only 12 years, and with good behavior she could be out even sooner. It seemed the judge was swayed by her tearful performance. Despite the footage showing her calmly applying lipstick moments before the attack, Sierra's defense that she wasn't in her right mind was accepted. The district attorney later explained that her lack of a criminal history, her apparent remorse, and her status as a first-time offender all contributed to the lenient sentence. But that didn't make it any easier to accept. 12 years for hunting us down, for planning and executing her attack, only stopping because a bystander intervened. To make matters worse, during sentencing, Sierra turned to us and offered a weak, rehearsed apology, claiming she hadn't been herself that day. As if that could justify running someone over. Valerie didn't respond. She just stared at her, cold and silent. Though the sentence felt too light, there was some relief. At least we wouldn't have to constantly look over our shoulders in parking lots anymore. There was another silver lining, though. After hearing about the attempted murder, the judge's stance on alimony shifted. Divorce proceedings moved quickly after that. Sierra attended the hearings remotely from prison, and the judge made it clear: attempted murderers don't get spousal support. Sierra's lawyer tried to argue for a share of my assets, but every attempt was dismissed. In the end, all Sierra walked away with was her personal belongings, a few effects, and a modest prison account. After months of outrageous demands in the divorce, she left empty-handed. However, I couldn't stay in that apartment. The memory of discovering her infidelity was a wound that wouldn't heal in that space. So Valerie and I moved to a new place, closer to the city with a beautiful view, and no ghosts of the past. Today, Valerie is fully recovered. Her leg bears no visible trace of the injury, unless you know where to look. Sometimes she jokes that being hit by a car was worth it because it pulled me out of that toxic relationship. Her dark humor, but it helps. I often wonder if I should have seen it coming. Maybe when she started lashing out over the smallest things. Maybe when she refused to go to therapy. But sometimes madness doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it doesn't show up until it's behind the wheel, charging toward you. But I'm in a much better place now. Valerie and I bonded over our shared love of sci-fi, and these days, it feels like we're writing our own story, one with a much happier ending. We're planning to get married next spring. Sierra will eventually be released, but we'll be ready. Both of us now have concealed carry permits, thanks to Valerie's dad, a firearms instructor. It's just a precaution, in case Sierra ever decides to make another appearance in our lives. If you're dealing with a tough divorce or diving back into dating, stay vigilant. Maybe skip the mall parking lots for a while. And for your own safety, make sure to properly vet anyone you let into your life, especially if they might take rejection as a reason to attempt murder. Thanks for reading this twisted chapter of our lives, Reddit. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Bonus points for car jokes. Valerie's favorite so far? Your ex really drove that relationship off a cliff. And yes, we still visit the bookstore. No, we do not park in that same lot. Our story comes to an end here. Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you enjoyed this story, please check out other videos on this channel. See you soon, my dear friend.